All right, so we transition over to the college basketball side here for our Handicapping the Hardwood segment. And again, I will separate these for our listeners out there. But something you mentioned on Twitter and something I think is worth talking about here before we get into some specific game breakdowns, the under was cashing at a remarkable rate early on in the season. Based on what you said on Twitter, I believe it was yesterday or maybe a couple of days ago, things have normalized quite a bit.
They have normalized quite a bit. I think I said that a couple days ago, and then yesterday the over did really well again. Looking at it here as I'm talking, but the over was 37-21 yesterday. So, yeah, the over has done better here in the last week than has the under. I think that really things have just pretty much normalized. You know, we're going to have these days where the over does quite a bit better, days where the under does quite a bit better. Obviously, there's going to be some days where a lot of games go into overtime, and that causes more overs. Some days where there's less overtime periods. But in general, right now, I don't think that there's any real edge to be had, you know, just blindly betting unders earlier in the season. I mean, if you were following along there in the first 3, 4, 5 days, and you started seeing how far under the total some of these games were going, I know there was quite a few people who were able to take advantage of taking quite a few unders, especially on those neutral sites. But I don't think that easy money is to be had anymore. You know, I've had a good college basketball season thus far. Part of it was from taking a lot of these unders. I still find value on unders on some games. I like some overs too. So I think that things have normalized out quite a bit. And some people who just start looking at college basketball now, you know, I think that's a good point to note here that, you know, while you look at the season to date numbers and you think that you just want to take the under, I think that value may be gone.
All right, once again, before we get into some specific games here, we do have 4 of them we're going to try to get to quickly here. I got to ask you, game 831, 832 tonight is Virginia and Purdue. And if you like scoring, this is very clearly not the game for you. But, man, I cannot remember 2 premier teams with a total like this. It's unbelievable.
It really is something else. And I couldn't take the over. I mean, my number is below this. It's 103 here. I had 101 for this one. I didn't want to take the under because, I mean, all it takes is one scoring stretch where everybody hits, you know, multiple shots in a row and you're sitting there with under 103 and you're like, man, I lost, you know, that's it. I can't take the under. I don't want to bet the over. My numbers suggest the under might be still have a little bit of value, but I can't take unders with 103. It's just, you know, it's hard enough to take unders when you're sitting at 120. You get down to 103, I just have to pass. But I was kind of looking at this Virginia when they play Navy here in a few weeks. I think we may see a total below 100, which would really be fascinating.
Yeah, it would. And it's crazy. You know, it's absolutely insane. But I guess one other thing I'll ask you about here, you know, we got the Big Ten ACC Challenge going on. Kind of a split night. You know, Duke beats Michigan State. Very nice win for the ACC. But Indiana crushes Florida State at home. A very good win for them. Iowa with an impressive win over Syracuse. What's the best conference in the country right now for you from a college basketball standpoint?
I think those two conferences are pretty even. I know that's somewhat of a cop-out answer. Big Ten, a really deep conference. ACC has some really good teams there at the top. You know, the Big Ten has consistently been this way, that they have several really good teams, and you think, I'm not sure which one of these teams could win it all, and they haven't won it all since, 2001, I believe. So that was back in the Mateen Cleaves days. So, you know, I hope the Big Ten wins it sometime soon, being a Big Ten fan. But I guess I would say that, you know, Big 12 also is a very good conference. If you look at consistency and how many teams are very good there in the Big 12, you could argue that the Big 12 is the best conference. But, you know, I would say that the Big 10 has a slight edge over the ACC, in my opinion. But others may disagree, and I think that's fair. It's hard to tell which of these conferences is better. I will say one thing that I've kind of wanted to bring up on here in last night's game, pointed it out that it seems to be the case. And I kind of hate to say this too early, but it kind of seems like Indiana might be really good again. You know, maybe Indiana basketball is back. The way Green's playing right now, I mean, if he keeps that up, that's going to help them quite a bit. And then Jackson Davis has been really good as a freshman. So I think Indiana's a pretty dangerous team.
Yeah, it sure looks that way. And, another interesting result from last night, Louisville and Michigan. I mean, Louisville just might be really, really good. And Chris Mack might just be a top 5 type of coach here in college basketball. After what Michigan did in the Bahamas, coming back, scoring 43 points. But that was something you mentioned. And there are a lot of situational spots again this week. I've got that article over at BangTheBook.com, teams playing at altitude, so on and so forth. But pay attention to these situations, man. Michigan playing the 3 games in 3 days, that big tournament win. Then they go play a first true road game and lay a giant ass egg. Situational spots are still going to be very prevalent here as we go forward.
Absolutely. I think this is a really good time for situational spots. You look at some of these spots that teams are in, and it can be pretty brutal. And coming back from a game like that, where you've played in a big tournament, Michigan winning as much as they did in that tournament, obviously, and then come back for a big game right away. It was a bad spot for Michigan. I think that showed, but I do think Louisville's a very good team. I want to say one under the radar game here real quick from last night. Jackson State versus Denver. So Jackson State was playing their second game in altitude in a row. They played Air Force on Sunday, played Denver on Tuesday night. One of the most fascinating box scores you'll ever see in your life. Denver had 27 turnovers and won by 9 points. They had 32 free throws to 9 for Jackson State. Jackson State was 2 for 24 on 3-pointers. Tristan Jarrett made 2 3-pointers. Everybody else was 0 for. It's really interesting to see, but that is kind of speaks to what we've talked about before, that some of these teams under the radar, like a team like Jackson State that's playing a double at altitude, that's a pretty bad spot for them.
Yeah, it really is. That's an excellent point. And there's another one here tonight. You've got UC Davis taking on Northern Arizona. For those that don't know, Northern Arizona in Flagstaff, it's almost 7,000 feet above sea level. It is very, very high in elevation. Cal Davis playing a 4th straight road game. They played Utah November 29th. So not as close in proximity as some of these altitude doubles, but that's a line that's gone from 4 to 6 here. So again, you get some line value paying attention to these situational spots. And speaking of one of those, Cal and San Francisco. And I sent this one over to you when we were talking about games that we wanted to discuss yesterday. You didn't realize that San Francisco is in a back-to-back here, not a tournament, a regular season back-to-back against Pac-12 competition off of a pretty tough loss last night to Arizona State.
Yeah, I mean, I realized that they were playing another Pac-12 team, San Francisco, but I didn't realize they're going to play the next day. And that is very rare that you would intentionally schedule a game the next day. And I guess I don't understand why, if you're San Francisco, you would want to play Pac-12 opponents on back-to-back days. This spot's about as bad as you could get for San Francisco, and they're laying 8.5 points here, coming off a close loss, a game where they could have won against Arizona State. I told you this beforehand. I mean, if somebody else wants to bet Cal, they're going to have to do it. I can't bet Cal here. I know that you're supposed to bet Cal. Cal's a team that I want to fade. I think Mark Fox is a pretty good coach, but Cal lacks talent in a big way. I think they have the least amount of talent in the Pac-12. Obviously the Pac-12 is not a great conference. They're a little bit better than they used to be, but there are some pretty bad teams in the Pac-12, and I think Cal is the worst. If Cal plays well here tonight, I consider fading them next game against Santa Clara. It's what I'm hoping for at this point. I'm not going to bet this game. I can certainly understand if somebody wants to take Cal here plus 8.5, or maybe even, take plus 8.5 and take a little bit on the money line based on the spot for San Francisco. I think if you do take Cal here, you probably want to take the money line for at least part of your bet, because there is some chance that San Francisco could be really down and out about yesterday's game and just lay an egg in this spot.
Yeah, it could certainly be a possibility. And selfishly, I'm hoping San Francisco loses this game, because I think they're going to be a really good play-on team in the West Coast conference portion of the season, because that's not a great conference outside of Gonzaga and St. Mary's. I think San Francisco is a pretty solid team overall. If they get some of these losses here in the non-conference, might give us a little bit more value. But as I'm looking at San Francisco's schedule, and this is important to point out too, they have 10 days off between this game and their next game when they play Cal State Fullerton. It's winter exam time. So a lot of these teams with substantial layoffs here. I guess I saw Miami plays one game in the span of 20 days, something like that. I know there's another team I saw has over 2 weeks off before their next game. Keep an eye on that. You're going to have some teams shaking off the rust here as we get closer to the holidays.
Yeah, definitely. And then you may find some good first half spots in games like that. Some people think that, you have a long layoff, it might actually be good for getting rested up. If that's the case, it's usually the case in the second half. The first half, I would be very cautious backing teams like that.
All right, so we take a look at some of the other games that we wanted to touch on here for this week, and we jump ahead to Friday, and I think this is an interesting one. And in fact, I wrote up Penn and Villanova over at BangTheBook.com here today for Wednesday, because I think these geographic rivalry games are really, really fascinating. And we've got one here on Friday, obviously no line as we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, but an interesting game here between Providence and Rhode Island.
Yeah, I think this is a good game. I like this one. When you sent me this game, I was pretty excited to talk about this one, to be honest with you. A really nice under-the-radar rivalry. To me, Providence should be far better than they've been so far this year. 291st toughest schedule, according to Ken Palm. Still only 5-4. Pipkins is a nice addition to this team after he transferred over from UMass. Diallo, the star of the team. Providence on paper should be a good team. They should definitely be better than they were last year. So far this year, they haven't shown it. You wonder if maybe chemistry so far has been a bit of an issue. I'm impressed with what Rhode Island's done so far this year. They've played the 84th toughest schedule so far this year. They've played well. As I'm looking down through Rhode Island's games, and I was just kind of checking through box scores, Fats Russell has been playing extremely well. First of all, a great name, and we have to shout out the name. I was going to say, I feel like we have to take a second to shout out that name, if nothing else. But shooting numbers way up from last year. He's always been a really good passer, and now he's been shooting the ball really well. Rhode Island, 7th in the nation in minutes continuity from last year. So this is the same team as last year, just about. They lost last year to Providence in a fairly close game at Providence. I like Rhode Island in this game. I see Ken Palm has by 1 point in this one. I wonder if Rhode Island will be favored by a little bit more than that. Hopefully not too much. I like Rhode Island in this game. And of the games that we're going to talk about, I think this is my favorite one as far as wanting to take a side. Providence hasn't shown me much yet. Rhode Island has been very consistent. Providence has played a lot of these neutral site games here where they just played Charleston, Pepperdine, and Anaheim. Long trip. You got Rhode Island here. They haven't been a long ways away from home, at least recently. They played at West Virginia, certainly not the trip that California would be. So I think Rhode Island's in a better spot than is Providence. And I like this Rhode Island team being so consistent. So far this year, they don't have any really bad loss. They lost to West Virginia by 5 points. That's not a bad loss. West Virginia's been playing well. They lost to Maryland by 18. Maryland's played really well so far this year. A nice win against Alabama at home by 14 in a game with 84 possessions. So I also do think that this game will be pretty quick tempo based on Providence wanting to play faster than they did a year ago. Hate to take an over in a game like this because it is a rivalry game. You'd think that the defense would be pretty good in a game like this. My favorite way to play this game is Rhode Island. I think this is a pretty good spot for the Rams.
Yeah, Torvik's got the Rams minus 2.7 to be exact in his numbers. So -3 there. Ken Palm got this one around 1. So we'll see what this line winds up looking like. And that's an important thing too. Providence playing a weak schedule and having problems with it. That's a big red flag. And Ed Cooley's a very good head coach. I'm sure he'll have things squared away by the time, Big East play starts for them. But keep that in mind too. Some people are going to scoff at some of these teams that have gaudy records, that have played really weak schedules. Like Louisville's strength of schedule was nowhere near Michigan's in last night's game, but Louisville dominated that game. If you play a bad schedule and you dominate it, that's one thing. If you play a bad schedule and you struggle, that's another. So I don't hold it against teams that play bad schedules if they're winning by margin and doing what they're supposed to do. If you play a bad schedule and you're not doing what you're supposed to do, that's a much bigger red flag for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And here you've got a big strength of schedule difference, and you've got a Rhode Island team that's been more consistent against that tougher schedule. Providence with losses to Long Beach State, and College of Charleston and Penn at home. Not that those teams are terribly bad. Long Beach State is a bad loss, but in general, Providence should be better than those teams, and their talent level is certainly higher than those teams. So Providence has had some trouble. They've shot really poorly from the free throw line so far this year, not been very efficient on offense in general. So I think Rhode Island's a pretty good look here.
Some interesting stuff here this week. We do have some conference action. The Big Ten plays conference games, the ACC as well, I believe, and then the Mountain West also playing some conference games here to close out this week. But this one is not a this one is not a conference game, but this is a rivalry to the extreme on Saturday. Xavier, Cincinnati, crosstown shootout. These two teams do not like each other one bit.
What a rivalry. This is a really good one. I always want to watch this one every single year. You have to remember that Yancey Gates fight, right? I mean, that one was an epic. That showed what the rivalry is. I certainly hope that doesn't happen again. I don't want that. I like really good, hard-fought games, and I think that's what we'll have here. Cincinnati and Xavier. Cincinnati played 3 straight overtime games before beating Vermont in regulation. Their last game. Cincinnati has a new system under John Brannon. Their shooting numbers are a lot better this year. And as I was kind of looking through their data, I was saying, man, their shooting numbers are up a lot, but their scoring is not very impressive. Turnover's been a real problem for Cincinnati so far this year compared to a year ago. Both Jaron and Javen Cumberland, the cousins there, Javen transferred over from Oakland. Jaron's been there obviously before. Those two are cousins, both of them very good players. I think that both of them have struggled a little bit with turnovers so far this year. Maybe it's just the new offense. We'll see if they improve with that. But I do think it's interesting to point out that they've been struggling so much with turnovers because Xavier ranks 50th in turnover percentage. I was reading before the year that Travis Steele wanted to be more aggressive on defense. So far, that's actually worked out quite well because they're 50th in turnover percentage. Last year, they were 309th. So really big change. Xavier's a really weak outside shooting team. I think Cincinnati's going to do their best to dare them to beat them from 3 here. Can Xavier still get to the hoop or not? Can they get inside the paint? I think that's really the big question of this game. I don't think Xavier just wants to settle for outside shots. They don't have those really good shooters that they had a couple years ago. I remember Blewett and guys like that, where they had some really good shooters on this team. Xavier now more of a team that needs to get inside, needs to get to the rim and get to the free throw line. Cincinnati's going to be getting points here. I think Ken Palm had this one at 6. I don't have Torvik right in front of me right now, but I think Cincinnati will be catching several points in this game. I have to lean plus the points with Cincinnati. I think this will be a close game. Don't like this one quite as much as far as betting it as the one we just talked about, but I do think, depending on the line here, Cincinnati plus the points is certainly my lean.
Yeah, Torvik's got it 5.8, so right there in that 6 range as well. One other quick note, Xavier plays Green Bay tonight, and Green Bay loves to run. I don't know if they speed Xavier up here in this game, but certainly a look-ahead spot for the Musketeers, and that line coming down from 18.5 to 16.5. So somebody paying attention to the fact that crosstown shootout game is coming up here on what is a very, very good Saturday of college basketball games. Arizona Baylor's a good one. You've got West Virginia and St. John's is kind of intriguing. Florida and Butler's a good game. Good conference test for Ohio State against Penn State. Maryland and Illinois should be a nice one. Good Saturday here in college basketball, and a pretty decent Sunday as well. Looking at Seton Hall, Iowa State, Wichita State, Okie State, Dayton and St. Mary's is a good game in a neutral site out in Phoenix. North Carolina and Virginia will be fascinating. But the one we're going to focus on for Sunday here, Gonzaga and Washington. What do you think about how this one sets up, Kyle?
Yeah, I looked at this game quite a bit here as I was making some notes about this one. Both teams really have a lot of upside. I like both of these teams. I think they're both really well coached. Both teams have played a really weak schedule so far this year. They've played some very weak teams and beaten up on them. Gonzaga is a really tall team. Usually they're going to have the height advantage. They're fourth tallest team in the country. Washington's seventh, though. They have a lot of length. Gonzaga can make those threes that you have to make against Washington's matchup zone. So I think that Gonzaga matches up better against this zone than most people would. And I went to Synergy to look up how Gonzaga has done against the zone. They're in the 85th percentile in the country against zone so far this year. They're 98th against man-to-man, though, so a little bit better against man-to-man than zone. Last year, they were 99th percentile against man-to-man and 95th against zone. So maybe Gonzaga not quite as good against the zone defense. Usually that's just because you don't play it as much. It's unique. But Gonzaga does have the shooters to beat this zone. I think Washington really needs to hold their own on the turnover battle here. And usually we talk about turnover battle in college football, but to me, this is really important because Washington's been a little bit sloppy with the basketball so far this year. They're very good at forcing turnovers. Gonzaga is very likely to out-rebound Washington in this game. Washington usually struggles with defensive rebounding, especially with, really playing that high matchup zone and pushing it out there. The three-point line's a little bit farther out this year. I don't think they want to let Gonzaga just get open looks. I think Gonzaga gets a lot of second chance points here. My slight lean in this game is Gonzaga, but both these teams are really young. As you're looking at experience and continuity from last year, both of these teams with quite a bit of turnover. I'm going to lean Gonzaga here. I think they'll probably be -2, maybe -1.5, something like that. But I probably am going to pass on this game. I think this really is a fascinating game, though, to learn about these two teams.
It really is. You look at Torvik, he's got Gonzaga -3 on the road here against Washington. Last year, a 2-point game, 81-79. The 3 years before that, Gonzaga by 27, by 27, and by 16. So Washington obviously really hoping that this is the year that they can knock off the Zags. Got very close to doing it last year on the road at Gonzaga. This year getting that game at home. Big brother versus big brother type of game here. So definitely looking forward to that one on Sunday. Kyle Hunter, professional handicapper over at huntersportspicks.com. What's going on over at the website right now, man?
Well, it's been a really nice run here of late. 52-24 in my last 76 premium plays. 68-51 on the season so far in college football. So very solid season. Got a couple specials. The college football bowl season pass, $349. That's through the title game. Every play that I make through that title game. If you want college hoops, $550 for the year. You can mention the Bang the Book special. Send me a message, Kyle at huntersportspicks.com or at Kyle Hunter Picks on Twitter. And also, if you're looking for free plays, 90 and 56 in my last 146 free plays sent to newsletter subscribers. You can sign up for free at huntersportspicks.com. Also, be on the lookout for some free bowl analysis that I'm going to be giving on games where I don't have a premium play. I'll be posting in weeks ahead for where you can find that. You can follow me on Twitter at Kyle Hunter Picks. I'll be posting the link there. And also, I'll send a link for that free bowl analysis to all newsletter subscribers.
Kyle Hunter, huntersportspicks.com is the website. At Kyle Hunter Picks is the Twitter handle. Kyle, we appreciate your time as always, man. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, man. Take care.